Hello and welcome to Attacking Third, a CBS Sports Soccer podcast. I'm Sandra and Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports. Joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, NWSL analyst and broadcaster. On today's episode, we are continuing our NWSL 2022 team-by-team previews, and today we're going to take a deep dive into OL Reign. But first, a quick reminder, follow us on Twitter for all breaking news at Attacking Third. If you're listening to this as a podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and review. That takes just a second and it helps us out so much. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, the 5-star rating review page, and on Spotify, right on the Attacking Third page. So go ahead, give us 5 stars. Help us out if you like what you hear. Lisa, we're just rolling out these team previews, and now we get to chat all about OL Reign. How you doing today?
We do. Happy Friday, happy weekend for us. So that's exciting. We don't get a lot of weekends left before the season starts, Sandra. So I hope you're using them wisely, relaxing.
What is relaxing, right? When you live in the world of soccer, there's always something going on in the world related to it in some kind of way, and we are gonna continue that conversation here about OL Reign. Let's get into maybe team overview, right? Let people know what how the team is looking heading into the 2022 season, what happened during the off season. I think we got to start with the head coaching position, right? We heard a lot about different teams needing to go ahead and fill their coaching position. OL Reign kind of maybe beating everybody to the punch, having a little bit of a mid-season coaching change there. The return of Laura Harvey to the Reign franchise returned in July of 2021. Former 3-time NWSL Coach of the Year, retained majority of the assistant coaching staff. Right, Sam Lady still with the club, has been with the club since 2013, but the coaching staff fully in place. Right, as the off season kicked off, and now as preseason is underway. Some other notable hires, for this franchise, they have a general manager in Nick Perea, a former U.S. Beach Soccer national team captain, elected member of the U.S. Soccer Athlete Council, and was with Washington Youth Soccer as an executive director. And their finish in 2021, they finished at number 2 in the standings, but they lost in the semifinals to eventual NWSL champions Washington Spirit, falling in the semifinals just short of a finals appearance. 2-1 was the final in that match, but still ambitious, right? I think we had them up high once again. We did an episode of Attacking Third in December of 2021, our way too early power rankings episode, and we still kept them ranked high. Lisa, we had them at number 2 overall.
Yeah, honestly, that December episode feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
But
Right.
we put OL Reign at number 2, which is exactly how they finished the 2021 season. And there's a reason for that. We're going to kind of dive into all of that. But this is an interesting roster, an interesting year. I think Laura Harvey has a lot to prove ahead of her. I think that her stepping in the middle of the 2021 season was really good for this squad. I mean, we saw a lot of coach departures in 2021 and a lot of new coaches coming in. And for Laura Harvey coming back to OL Reign, she was with Seattle of Reign for so many years, right? I mean, 2013 through 2017. So the fact that she returned was exciting. It was like the perfect fit to the puzzle for Laura Harvey and for this squad. And she took them all the way to second place. I mean, I'm going to phrase that as a positive. She took them to second place because she really turned around the season for them. Let's just imagine what she can do with a full season, a full preseason with a team and this squad. And we're going to dive into it, who's listed on the roster and what's happening. But we had them at number 2. Listen towards the end of this episode and we'll see where we place them for 2022.
Listen, we saw them go on an incredible run in that second half of 2021, and they fell just short of their goal, obviously. And coming into the offseason that took place, right, with all of the player movement ahead of a double expansion draft, an NWSL draft class, right, that they had to participate in, there was a number of acquisitions and moves that they made to try to flesh out their roster in light of, some pretty big losses, which we'll get into as well. But in terms of sort of breakout roster signings, whether it was trades or player acquisitions, or quite frankly, new contracts or extensions that were signed. Let's take a look at some of the players who are returning to OL Reign. You got Lauren Barnes, Ziara King, NWSL 2021 MVP Jess Fishlock, Megan Rapinoe also signing an additional year contract with the franchise that she's been with since 2013. A trade with Chicago Red Stars brought Nikki Stanton into the mix. They made a trade for Veronica Latsko, re-signed Sofia Huerta, traded for Phoebe McClernand as well. And Bethany Balser also amongst the players signing a contract like Ziara King or Sofia Huerta, a multi-year contract, 3 years for Balser with this team. In terms of the biggest losses, said farewell, right, to the French trio that came into the mix and helped them out down the stretch. Eugenie Le Sommer, Jennifer Marozan, Sarah Bouadi, all players with Olympique Lyonnais and back in France for their season. And the re-retirement, maybe I should say, of Stephanie Cox, right, came out of retirement to play with the club and then retired once more. In terms of all of the different signings, right? Maybe the contract extensions, the trades that were made for player acquisition versus the losses that we're taking a look at here with this club, Lisa. What stands out to you across these moves?
A couple other losses included. I mean, Shirley Cruz, Amber Brooks, Leah Pruitt, Celia, Leah Pruitt and Celia going to Orlando Pride, and then Shirley Cruz and Amber Brooks being waived at the end of the 2021 season. I mean, a lot of moves actually happening, a lot of re-signings. And I think that the re-signings say a lot, not just about the roster, but about the personnel and about head coach Laura Harvey and what that these veterans in Megan Rapinoe, Lauren Barnes, Jess Fishlock, what they look at in Laura Harvey as a head coach, kind of what she's willing to do for them and what they're willing to do for her, because these players are been around and been in this league for a long time, been with this organization and this club for a while through the rebrand and everything, and they're still willing to be there. I think them also locking down a standout defender like Sofia Huerta is a huge get for this club. I think Laura Harvey can do some damage with Sofia Huerta. This is when Harvey came in 2021, we started to see more of Sofia Huerta in the outside back position, which is where she thrives. And that was Laura Harvey's doing and putting her there. But for me, I think the biggest ones are these re-signings in these big veteran players in Jess Fishlock, Megan Rapinoe, even Sofia Huerta, Bethany Balser, the undrafted 2019 player that became Rookie of the Year in 2019. This is a team that has a lot of chemistry and they're sticking around. These players are sticking around for another year. The losses that you mentioned, the big players coming over from Olympique Lyon for the loan in 2021. Yes, they're losses, but also we knew that they were always just a loan. We knew that ELS Le Sommer wasn't going to be with OL Reign for her entirety of her career or even for 2022. So big losses on the pitch perhaps, but we knew it was coming, right? This is not a surprise. For you, Sandra, is there one signing or loss that kind of outweighs the other that stands out to you the most?
I don't know if we take a look at the signings, right, versus the losses, if one maybe cancels out the other. But I think when we're looking in terms of something like familiarity for this club to have going into the 2022 season, they achieved that in the off season, right? And I think we saw it with a lot of these contracts that were being issued. And I think they were smart about it as well. The fact of the matter is, when you look across this roster, and we'll take a look at that right now and we read things off by position, but it's kind of split, right? You've got players who are veteran players of this club that have been involved in the Reign franchise in some capacity for years. And then you have this sort of middle tier where there are experienced NWSL players, right? Somebody like a Huerta probably fits that mold, right? And I would include even somebody like a Let's Go in that as well. And then you've got a slew of new faces, maybe younger prospects, right, that are still carrying over from that previous season into this season as well, right, along with some of the draft picks that they made, during the off season. So I feel really the way they went about implementing these contract extensions, issuing out the new contracts, right? Ensuring that these veteran players have that 1 year, maybe an option, right? To get the band together and have one more crack at it and go on it, right? Combined with these longer term contracts, right? With these other players that they want to continue building with a 3-year contract for King, for Huerta, for Balser, players that they really want to lock in, right? And continue to have as part of this Reign franchise, maybe this sort of collective three that they can continue to be these faces of this team moving forward. So I don't know if it cancels it out, but I do like what the franchise did in terms of their player acquisitions and their re-signings. Let's maybe look at it all as a whole. Let's throw out the entire preseason roster by landscape, right? By position. Let's take a look at the goalkeepers. They've got Claudia Dickey, Laurel Ivory, Cosette Moshe, Fallon Toulouse-Joyce. For defenders, they have Lauren Barnes, Ryan Brown, Alana Cook, Madison Hammond, Sam Hyatt, Sofia Huerta, Alyssa Mallinson, Jimena Lopez, Phoebe McClernon, and Sinclair Miramontes. For midfielders, Angelina, Olivia Athens, Marley Canales, Jess Fishlock, Rose Lavelle, Quinn, Nikki Stanton, Olivia Van der Jat, excuse me. For forwards, Bethany Balser, Jeanette Kajan, Ziara King, Veronica Latsko, Megan Rapinoe, and Ali Watt. I think something that sticks out there immediately, right, Lisa, when we're looking at the roster as a whole, but when we're talking about biggest acquisitions, when we're talking about signings, Rose Lavelle has to be included in terms of probably their biggest, most important signing, right? Coming off of this offseason. Another player alongside some of these other players that we were just talking about with the Reign franchise saying, hey, we're going to be moving forward with this core of group of players for their foreseeable future. And I think when you're looking at that midfield, that absolutely stands out, number one.
Rose Lavelle does stand out. I mean, she always stands out on a roster, in a training room, on the pitch, at practice, in a match. She just stands out. But it's the midfield overall, despite not having players like that they had from OL Reign and on loan last year. This midfield for OL Reign is still very lethal. It's something that other clubs look at. They circle it's scouting reports. They're honed in on players like Rose Lavelle, like Angelina, like Jess Fishlock, like Megan Rapinoe, who is listed as a forward, but she can drop into the midfield, and Olympic gold medalist Quinn. There's just a lot of star power in the middle of the field for OL Reign, and that's their engine. That's where this team runs through. And it's proven to be very difficult for other teams to break down. And then I think what's interesting is looking at how much power they have in the middle of the field for them, but also what's maybe missing up top. I'm going to say they have Megan Rapinoe on this roster. They have Bethany Balser, who is a player that didn't get probably as much time as she wanted to in 2021, just in and out of the lineups and not a lot of consistency. And then also Ziara King. This is another player that has had their spells and their bouts of really good soccer and really good ball movement and really good consistency on the pitch. I think adding Veronica Latsko into this forward line will help OL Reign, because they have all the power in the middle of the field with all of their big heavy hitters, but does it translate to the front line? If you can have your midfielders consistently being a midfield role and then allow your forwards to be their forward role, the midfield won't get as tired. They won't have as many jobs to fulfill. They won't have as many boxes to check off, and they can continue to do their job while the forwards do theirs. So Veronica Latsko is a player that I want to see her develop a little bit with this OL Reign team, and especially under Laura Harvey throughout the 2022 season. But not a huge roster compared to some of the other clubs that have laid out their preseason roster. This one is very manageable. Very manageable for Laura Harvey and OL Reign.
I think when you're looking across these lines, even though it's maybe not as big as some other preseason rosters, right? You can look through each of the lines and kind of find some standout players, ones who will probably help anchor each specific line, with also sort of having a little bit of different depth, right? For them to take a look at. When we looked at those big losses, right? And then when we look at this preseason roster, we see, a player like Le Sommer, right? No longer going to be available for that attack. Somebody like Marozan, who was absolutely integral, right? For that midfield and how it looked in terms of the attack. But despite them not being there, having the reigning MVP, right, signing up Rose Lavelle for an extended contract, right? Even seeing the return of somebody in Angelina, right, the Brazilian international, who can help sort of get different looks in the attack, but they also still have a very steady presence with somebody like Quinn in that mix, someone who was essential, right, to this midfield down the stretch. And quite frankly, what we're seeing them take this next step on the international stage, how they just become this sort of integral figure when it comes to being able to both spearhead an attack or shut things down, looking much better with them on the pitch versus off the pitch, right? So
Mhm.
despite those losses, maybe even looking at the options in the depth here, still got to say, like, if everything goes okay, if everyone stays healthy, it still looks like a pretty solid midfield on paper, right? But we got to see that come to life, in on the pitch and in games for sure. I'm with you with the points that you made about the attack. How's that going to look in terms of their forward options, and in terms of how that's going to look moving forward? When we're looking at all of these lines and when we're thinking of an ideal starting 11, right? I think there's a ton of players here that you can point out and say they're likely to be locks come that opening day, right? When that whistle happened, you're looking across that. We're talking a lot about the midfield, and we can obviously choose players there. I think maybe the biggest opportunity might be in that goalkeeper
Yeah.
position, right? Who's going to impress? And maybe that leads us to maybe some different areas in which to take a look at for this roster when it comes to OL Reign. And we're looking at young prospects to keep an eye on for 2022. Who are you looking at to possibly have an impact for this team in 2022, Lisa?
I think we have to look at the goalkeepers, like you just mentioned, Sandra. They're who I am keeping an eye on because right now, OL Reign doesn't have a starting goalkeeper. And they brought in two in the NWSL draft, like you mentioned, in Claudia Dickey and Laura Ivory, but they also have Falon Tulis Joyce, who can fight for that starting position because right now, it is completely up for grabs. Usually we kind of look at the starting 11 and we see what standouts we have. And for a lot of other clubs, we've been able to name at least a goalkeeper that we're like, okay, you could get the start here. But for OL Reign, I think it's completely up for grabs right now. And I even could foresee at the start of this 2022 season, Laura Harvey playing different goalkeepers based on the competition that they're facing and trying out these three young goalkeepers to see who does well in game situations and game scenarios, because you can do a lot in training. And yes, these goalkeepers are going up against some very good forwards, a really good midfield squad, but it's different when you're going up against other opponents and other clubs, different threats that other teams provide, whether it's quickly in transition or it's over the top balls or it's shots from distance. So I'm keeping an eye on these young goalkeepers and especially the new draft picks in Claudia Dickey and Laurel Ivory. Dickey coming from UNC, picked in this draft, the 2022 draft, and Ivory coming from UVA. Can they prove themselves, get minutes, which is really tough to do as a goalkeeper? But I'm keeping an eye on these young players to see which one kind of wiggles out as more apt at playing in goal for Laura Harvey and OL Reign.
I like that. I'll be interested to see if maybe that comes into play. Like maybe that would be some type of X factor for the rain, where you're not too sure which goalkeeper you're gonna see. But I mean, I think I'm with you in terms of the biggest opportunity there, and young players to take a look at in terms of maybe the attacking side. I think we have to keep an eye on Ziara King, right? She's only 23. She was drafted out of NC State, initially arrived to All Rain, maybe didn't see a ton of minutes, was more of a player to come off of the bench, right, and create an impact for the team. But the 23-year-old is one of these players that we talked about signing a multi-year contract with this club. And when you see something like that, you imagine that there is intention behind that, right? To sort of, investment that you're going to retain this player and have them be a part of what you are, the goals that you are working towards and having to achieve. So in terms of that draft class specifically, right, having been impacted primarily by the pandemic and not necessarily having a first full rookie season, right, just sort of having that 2020 challenge cup to go off of and then continue taking these steps in your pro career. I'm absolutely excited to see what Ziara could bring,
Yeah.
for this attacking line of what this offense looks like in 2022.
I am really excited to see what they can bring, honestly, but I think they have to rely a lot on Jess Fishlock as, the MVP in 2021 coming into this squad to kind of bring it all together, right? She has the experience, she has the international experience playing with her Scottish international team and that nation to bring Ziara King up to speed. I mean, Ziara King has a lot of potential, but I want to see her grow. But frankly, like these players are in a great spot because they have Laura Harvey as their head coach, who has been across the world as a coach, U23 US women's national team, the youth programs in England. She's been with other English clubs. She's been at Seattle Reign previously and now back in the NWSL. She knows the clubs, she knows the league, she knows the different teams, and she can provide a lot for these players. I'm excited to see what can really happen for this team.
I am too. I'm with you 100% on the essential experience player that this team is going to have to rely on. They've got a number to pick
Mhm.
from, right? But I think you're 100% correct in going with the 2021 MVP, Jess Fishlock, right? The Welsh
Yeah.
Dragon. Although, I mean, when we look at the international spotlight, right? Like you said, these are players that there's players that are going to possibly be coming in and out of season, right? We are taking a look at the US side of things. Somebody like Alana Cook, Sofia Huerta, Roosevelt, possibly Megan Rapinoe. Bethany Balser was part of those
I know.
end of year camps, right? In 2021,
Yeah.
including the January camps as well. So there's players here on the US side of things, that could possibly be in and out. Jess Fishlock representing, the Welsh Dragon and possibly going to be gone as well, with Euros kind of coming up and UEFA kind of kicking things off. And even with just international windows, right? We're forgetting about Quinn in terms of representing
Yes.
the Canadian national team. So there's a number, even though like people are seeing like, hey, like there's an international spotlight and somebody like a Marozan isn't a part of it anymore. Somebody like Lace O'Mara isn't around anymore. Somebody like Buadi isn't around anymore. That doesn't mean there's not an international
Yeah.
spotlight on this team.
It doesn't have to be a loan that's coming in, which honestly, we could see that happen, right? I mean, loans are still possible. And because of OL Reign and their connection with Olympique Lyon in France, we could see a bit of transition happening between these clubs as well. But yeah, huge international spotlight. There's a lot of big time players on this squad. I think Quinn is a huge one because when Quinn is playing with the Canadian national team, OL Reign loses a lot in their midfield, because Quinn is such a good player. They have such great vision of the field. They have a great ability to spray the ball out and break out of tough tackles. It's a very odd thing to kind of explain to people watching Quinn play, whether it's with the Canadian national team or with OL Reign, because when Quinn is on the pitch, you don't recognize them necessarily. However, the moment that they leave and they are subbed out, that's when you notice the giant
Yeah.
hole in the midfield. That's when you notice that
Yeah.
OL Reign has lost their possessive momentum that they have. That's when you notice that teams can't transition as well, because when Quinn is there, you don't notice it because it's just so seamless. The game is not about them. It's about progressing the ball forward. So internationally, when CONCACAF windows happen and the W Championship, because a lot of U.S. national players will be gone, Quinn will also be gone. That's going to leave some big holes for Laura Harvey to try to fill and patch up.
And, we've seen oftentimes, right, when it comes to NWSL competition, how sometimes these games can really be won and lost, right, in that middle third, sort of having their absence in that midfield with Quinn missing potentially is going to be huge, like you said. So there's going to be stretches of time during this 2022 season that this rain team will probably be tested in other ways that maybe are more than just on the pitch and in a regular week. And when we go through the roster, right, when we talk about Laura Harvey with this side and having a full season in front of her, right, not jumping in mid-season, but having a full season in front of her, start to finish, potentially for this team, it leads us to our biggest burning question, right? And that's really, can Laura Harvey finally win an NWSL championship with this Reign franchise? It's official. She made her return to the National Women's Soccer League, rejoined the Reign franchise mid 2021. Sam Lady briefly had the reins for a little bit of the team as they started to navigate the second half of that season. And Laura Harvey coming in like a combo breaker saying, we're going to go, right? So players having the buy-in, responding to her coaching, and then going on and having the run that they did was very, very impressive. But they ultimately fell short of a couple of their goals. When you talk to, the coaching staff, or when you talk to players, they said, we wanted the shield. We wanted that NWSL championship. And they fell short on a couple different goals there, right? So when we're looking and asking, is this going to be the year where Laura Harvey finally wins the championship with the Reign? I don't know. This is also a year where the NWSL is expanding. The
Yes.
competition is leveling out even more than we had probably imagined in years past. So going from a 10 club league to now a 12 club league. But I don't know, Lisa, let's just roll into the projected finish. And maybe adjacent to that, you can answer. Do you think this is the year, and where do you think they're going to end up in 2022?
I think that it's not for lack of want. I
Yeah.
think that Laura Harvey wants it so bad.
Yeah.
And I think that Megan Rapinoe, Rose Lavelle, Quinn, Jess Fishlock, they want it so bad. It's not for lack of want or effort or commitment to it. It's just if kind of all the pieces can fall correctly, if they can get out to a quick start at the beginning of the 2021 season. And who knows, maybe this is the year for Laura Harvey. It's okay, projected finish for us. I'm keeping them at the top. I think that they will definitely make playoffs in 2022. I don't think they'll win the Shield. I don't think they'll outright win kind of the Shield for 2022 and get that number one spot. But I see them at number two. I see them getting that first round bye, being a namesake and solidifying their spot high in the rankings early on. It's not going to come down to the final week or so of games, and it's not going to come down to Laura Harvey is not going to let her team's standings be determined by other teams' play. So they will win themselves and do what they need to do to solidify their spot in the standings. Sandra, for you, I kind of want to throw a curveball question at you. Laura Harvey is an incredible coach. She's a 3-time NWSL Coach of the Year. Will she win Coach of the Year? And will she win an NWSL championship? Like, will she win one without the other? Which one is more likely for her in 2022?
Gosh, which one is more likely for her?
Yeah.
I think what's more likely is potentially Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
But I could tell you what I want to see. What I want to see is I want to see the championship. I would love to say Laura Harvey, NWSL champion. I'm with you on everything that you're saying. I think that we had them in number 2 in our power rankings, when we did our early power rankings in December. And I think it's a safe place to keep them. I think it's not unfair to keep them at number 2. Just because maybe you end up number 2 in the standings doesn't mean you can't go on to win an NWSL championship. That's always a possibility, right? Whether you're 1 through 6 in the table now when it comes to NWSL. So I feel comfortable leaving them there. I would love to see them go on to 2022 and have a ton of success on the pitch. It's a roster, I think, with an exciting core, right? With a mix of veterans and experienced players and young prospects as well. But I think we nailed it, honestly, in December. And I know we've been saying a lot. We'd love to come back and be proven wrong, but I'd actually love to come back and maybe be proven right on this.
Yeah, me too.
One that maybe I'll take, you know.
Yeah.
So we will see. Let's go ahead and wish OL Reign best of luck. Thank you all for joining us and listening to our OL Reign 2022 preview. We've got full team by team previews for all 12 clubs in the league coming up, so stay tuned. You can drop us your thoughts about OL Reign on Twitter at Attacking Third, or in the comments if you subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/Attacking Third. And don't go anywhere. We have an exclusive interview with OL Reign defender Alana Cook right after this quick break.